I'm going to start a little different today. I got Brian, he talked to some of you, and I thought I would do some attendance. Church attendance has been down. So I wanted to honor those who've been here. So I'm going to call out your name, much like back in the day, maybe when you're in school. And hey, if you're here online, I can't always see it. Why don't you let me know you're here today? I want to find out if you're here today, really. And so if you're here today and you're watching online, why don't you just say here, and then I will know you're here, and I'll call out your name, and we'll acknowledge you. I'm trying to find, there we go. I keep losing my comments. So if you're watching, it'll be a little delayed. But I'm going to go through. Brian wrote some names down here. So Scott Miller, when I call your name, all I need you to do is say here. So Scott, are you? There we go. All right. How many of you are flashing back to like middle school? Some of you are like, Maury, are you here? He's probably fixing stuff. Absent Maury. No, he's here. Pierre, are you here? Hugh, you here? Yeah. Oh, no, he's supposed to hear. That's okay. And no, he's like, here, Victoria. There we go. Sydney. Oh, them. Yeah, okay. Judith. Thank you for saying here, yeah. Lorna. Oh, yes, she was here. All right, kids. Murray, are you here? Ken? All right. Tanika. There we go. Reuben. Here. Philip. Oh, Phil and Philip. Oh, Phil. No, that's good. We got double Phil today. Double blessing. Robert Green. All right. Bubbly Bobbly. There we go. Jen Ward. Where is? I didn't see you back there. Alex T. Is Nathan Nemeth here? I'm finding out people are actually here. Look at that. I can't. That's good. So if you got your name on there, it's probably because you came early enough for us to do that. It wasn't that we valued you less if your name's not on here. So if you're here today, we're glad you're here. I just wanted to see who made it to church today, so you could say here. Actually, more like it was tying into my message title, which is up there, which is roll call. Who remembers roll call when they were younger? Similar to that, correct? It was a way to find out if you were there or not. Right? It was a way I could find out if you're here or not. I found out some people were here that I hadn't noticed yet. It happened at maybe sports camps. Anyone go to a sports camp and they gather you all together and they say your name? How about kids' church? If you grew up in kids' church, you come in and if there's enough people, they say your names. Definitely at school. As a substitute teacher in band, I would come in and I wouldn't know anyone, and I'd have sometimes 30 to 60 kids, and the only way I could do anything about knowing them there is I had to go through a roll call. Right? And so you'd say their names and they'd say here, and that was what was needed for the school to recognize that the kids were in class that day. That you went and said their name and they said here, that satisfied the criteria of attendance. You were physically in your seat. So you guys, to be attending today, you have satisfied the criteria. Good job for you. But how many of you know when you said you were here as a kid in school, the teacher called your name, you put up your name and said, here, that didn't mean anything except you were there physically in person. Like you were there physically, but just because you were sitting in your seat in your classroom didn't mean that your mind wasn't 100 miles away. It could have been in Hawaii on a beach. Any of you in Hawaii on a beach right now? In your mind? Maybe at school you were sitting there and your emotions and your desire was still in your comfy down comforter, all snuggled in your bed on that warm day. Anyone there right now in their emotions and their desire? No, it's not supposed to put up your hand, Scott. How many of you know that just because you said here when your name was called, it satisfies a roll call. It satisfied the teacher's thing, and then they would send the information out and your parents wouldn't get a phone call if that's how it worked back in your day. But it only meant that you were here in person and in body. The criteria were met. And for some reason, I think we tend to take that approach and we've convinced ourselves of this. That just being here is what matters most in what we're doing in life, whether it's school. If I'm at school, that's good. If I come to church, as long as I'm here. If I go to my job and I'm here, if I'm in a relationship, as long as I'm here, then everything's good enough. I heard this growing up at church, and I don't know if I necessarily disagree with it, but the idea was this. They said, if you could just get to church, if you could just be here for church, then everything's going to be fine. I understand the premise of that, of like if you can get in God's presence, but I've seen a lot of people come to church on a regular basis and not everything was fine. Not everything seemed to work out. Why is that? Well, I'm here. How about in relationships? If you take the here approach, maybe there's a couple that isn't doing that well in their marriage, and so they go for some counseling or some therapy, right? And generally, oftentimes you may get one that wants to go more than the other one. Typically, the guy usually doesn't. We're not very emotional. Typically, I said, Bob. I didn't say, Right? But they both go. And the body language, the therapist says, why are you here? Asks a bit about them. And the lady may be very interactive, and the guy's kind of just sitting like this. Right? And the therapist may start picking up on something and goes, well, do you want to, kind of want to be here, or what do you think? And the guy may say something like this, of like, is this what you want to be doing right now? And he goes, well, I'm here, aren't I? Right? Well, I'm here, aren't I? That must count for something. See, don't get me wrong, though. Here is better than absent. Like, I'm glad you're here today. Don't leave going, oh, Pastor Derek he wasn't glad. No, I am glad here is way better than absent. If you want any chance of success in an area, you got to at least show up. Like, if you're not showing up in your marriage, you're not going to have a lot of success. If you're not showing up at church at all, it's going to be tough to be in a part of community. If you're not showing up for your job, so here is good. But I think we can kind of fool ourselves and others when we think here is enough to make everything work out, to be successful by just being here. Maybe in your marriage, having a healthy marriage, here is enough. To experience God fully at church, here is enough. To succeed at your small business, here is enough. To do well at school, here is enough. To grow in maturity, here is enough. To have grounded emotions, here is enough. How many of you remember this during roll call at school? The teacher would be going through, and we said some names, and so you get someone like Marcy, and they're like, here. Grace, here. Apple butter, here. Incognito, here. The names that you have these days. I'm like, my kids' names are unique, but some of them are out there. But you're saying all these heres, and then there was always that clever kid. The one who had humor, the ones, like the ones that said other things here, like they just can't say here. And so there was always the clever kid, Gary or Mark. Is there any Garys or Marks here? I'm sorry if you're Gary or Mark, if you're watching online. Right? They thought they were trying to be funny, kind of the class clown wanted to make a joke, and so everyone's going here, and then you get to Gary. No, you get to Mark. And Mark, in all of his wit and wonder, says, Mark, and he goes, present, with that grin. You get it? Like present? Not here, I'm present. And everyone kind of laugh. And then Gary, not wanting to let Mark down and everybody else, right? You get here, and then present, and then she'd be like, Gary, and he'd be like, gift. You went to a different school? So then, trying to be clever off present, and then you get Gary saying gift, and you have all this happening, and so, teacher would be like, all right, Gary, settle down, that was clever the first 10 times, Mark, or you don't have to do that again, Derek. Oh, wait, maybe I'm just reliving. Maybe I was that guy. Maybe that's why I realized that. Anybody else that guy that want? Nah. Some of you did it, just in different ways. But Gary or Mark thought he was being clever by saying present. But I actually think rather than just being punny, he actually might have been purposeful without realizing it at that age. Not, Mark was trying to just add a pun, but maybe he was speaking into purpose, not just in terms of school attendance, but in terms of life, because this is what I've started to discover and started to learn. That just because you are here, check it off, does not necessarily mean you're present. Just because you are here for church today in body does not mean that you are present in mind, in desire, in spirit, in heart. Just because you are here for a relationship, for your marriage, doesn't mean that you're present in desire, in giving into it, in putting your energies in it. Just because you are here for something doesn't mean you're present for it. Just because you are here for someone doesn't mean you're present for them. Does that make sense? Bob's, oh, I thought you said you didn't get it. Okay. Just because you are here for something doesn't mean you are present in mind, in desire, in focus, in participation, in emotion. You know you can be in a marriage and you can be here for it. I'm here, aren't I? You could be eating the same food, sleeping in the same bed, taking your kids to the same activities, and be far from present in that marriage. Right? You could be here for a job, but you could be checking in at 9 o'clock, punching that card, and really just disengaging, putting in your time, and far from being present at that job and being productive. You could be here at school, at university, at college, but you could be far from being present in that your assignments take forever to get done. You're not doing your homework. You're not working at it. You're here. You've signed up. You've registered, but you're far from being present. You could be here at church today and have checked your social media 12 times. Could have played a game for 10, 15 minutes. Could have sat down during any part of the service, maybe not on the outside, but on the inside. You could be here today in church. You could come every Sunday faithfully and be miles from being present. Just because you're here for something doesn't mean you're present. Now, again, don't get me wrong. Here is better than absent. Here is better than absent, but here is not present. I've just discovered this, not just, but I discovered this. I'm grateful that we can watch online, and to all of those who are watching online, do I have any comments? Who said here? Kimberly Laliberty here. I'm checking you off. Thank you. Leah Link, thank you. Adrian Thomas is here. Jen Link is here. Marlene is here. Bonnie's here like double time. Tyler Moran's here. So thank you for joining us here. You are here. And so I want to say this. I find it a little more difficult, especially with kids. I've been here for services online at home, and it's really hard to be present. But I want to say this. People at home could actually be more present in the service today than someone watching right here in this building. It's harder, I think, to do it from home. Like, think, if you check your phone here when we're all kind of watching, what do you do at home? Like, it's so easy to just disengage and not be present. Anyways, you get a piece of toast. That's right, Bob. We're going to have toast next week. No. So here's the question I want to propose, I want to ask, that's we're going to challenge with us today and maybe into a little bit of next week. I got to get together with my wife because she's going to be ministering, co-ministering with me. The reason why I keep saying it like a question is because certain personalities just do not like this, getting in front of people. She's one of them, but we're pushing her because she's got a lot about praise in her heart. And I think we as a church need to go a little bit further in praise. Come on, yeah, let's encourage her today. The more I say it, the more it has to happen, right? So that's part of my strategy. So here's the question I want to ask. What do you think would change in your life if instead of just being here, you purpose to be present? What do you think would or could change in your life if instead of just being here, you moved everything into present? Did you get it? Okay, good. He's taking pictures right there. He always manages to get fun ones of me. Here's the definition of present, and then I created one that kind of fits. In a particular place, existing or occurring now, the period of time that is happening now. Look at your neighbor and say, now. The period of time that is happening now. This is what I put as a definition for present. The now that has your consistent, undivided attention and focus. The now that has your consistent and undivided attention and focus. You may be here at church, But are you present? Is it the now that has your consistent and undivided attention and focus? Have you given church today your present? And here's the question we're asking this. What would change in your life? What do you think could change in your marriage if instead of just being here, you became present? Present in your emotions. Maybe the walls that have been up, that have kind of put some distance, maybe those can start to come down. What would happen with your kids if they got some consistent, undivided attention and focus? Guys, I know what it's like to come home and be drained and fight the desire to just be here at home, but not really present with your kids. Anyone ever struggled with that? Absolutely, all the time. You just like, I've just put in it. And so with devices today, it's a lot easier to just kind of go to your own worlds. And so you're all here in the same house. Your kids are here at the same time, but you guys aren't present. We aren't present with each other. So what would change with your relationship with your kids if somehow you started working in some more ways to be present? What would happen in your job? What would happen in your small business, in your prayer life? If we moved beyond a here prayer like Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, whoever eats the fastest gets the most. That's a here prayer, not a lot of present being going on there. But if in our prayer life we were present, in our relationship with God, we were present. Not just here. I'm here for it, aren't I, God? No, are you present? Come on, look at your neighbor and say, are you present? Are you a gift? There, Bob, yeah, just for you. How about this? What would Sunday service look like if we came purpose to be present in praise and purpose to be present in worship and purpose to be present in the ministering of the word, purpose to be present for those who are new, showing them the love of Jesus, purpose to be present when we're ushering, when we're doing children's ministry, during the ministry time at the end, purpose to be present. What would it look like? How many of you know we could all use a little more present in some areas in our life? So we're going to talk about why that's important today, and I'm going to use a scripture that you might not have seen this way before, and so I'm just going to unpack a verse, and then we're going to go into it, the end of the verses, and touch on some key issues that are going on right now, and then we're going to be done. I'm already over time, but I can get there. We're going to read from Matthew. Matthew was a disciple, one of Jesus' followers, and he's jumping in and writing about the account of Jesus called the Sermon on the Mount. Anyone ever heard of the Sermon on the Mount before? It's this one where he pulls everybody up onto the side of a mountain. That's why it's called the Sermon on the Mount. Amazing how that works. And he's got some of his 12 there, most likely his 70, and some others have gathered. So there's probably a few hundred people and more coming as he's teaching them. And he just starts laying out some of the differences between pre-covenant or pre-him and the new covenant and what's going to happen. And he's talking to them, and he says some things like this, like, we used to follow rules and regulations and laws, but it's a hard issue now, right and wrong. Sin, if you do it in your heart, but you're following, and you know what, actually tying that in, I thought of that this morning as I was going over my notes. He's implying there that it's not just about here, it's about being present, it's about a heart issue. Are you there? So you could look like you have everything going on, but if you aren't present in some of this stuff, you're going to find difficulties. So Jesus says it's a heart issue, it's a presence issue. He also gives them the Lord's Prayer, Our Father, who art in heaven. Okay. Seeing if you guys knew that, right? He goes over the Lord's Prayer, lays that out for them, and then he talks about this. He talks about the light of the light of the body is the eye, and basically what he's saying is, listen, what you focus on, what you look at consistently and focus on, changes the direction of your life. What your attention is on. So he goes, if your attention and focus is on great and light things, your body will go in a good direction. But if you're looking at and focusing on bad things, evil things, dark things as he calls them, it's going to go into a dark place. So he's laying all this out. Matthew's writing about what Jesus is saying, and he comes to this verse. Many of you might know it, but maybe you haven't quite seen it this way before. And it says this in Matthew 6:24, no one can serve two masters. For either he will hate the one and love the other, or he'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. That first line, I'm just going to take that. No one can serve two masters. Now, on a literal idea of taking this, I don't think this is that in depth. Because we've been talking about here. And so, physically, you can't serve two masters at once. Like, let's put it into our context. Many of you might not have masters, but I think the idea of masters is just someone that consumes maybe your time. Something that consumes your time, your energy, your focus, your present. Right? It's really hard to be here, though, in physical for two masters. Or maybe analogy is this. If you're here today in church, guess what? You're not at home. Woo? Yeah. All right. And guess what? Those of you who are watching online, if you're at home today, you're not here. So in that context, you can't do two things physically at once. So even if you said, I wanted to have two bosses, and some of you may have two jobs, but guess what? You can't do two jobs at once. You may try. And then we'll get into what happens when you do that. But you can't physically be in two places at once. Jesus is saying you can't physically serve two masters. It's impossible unless you have a superpower. And then you can be in multiple places at once like the Holy Spirit. Maybe one day. But right now, you physically can't be in two places at once. So that's not mind-blowing depth. But I think there's something more that Jesus might be talking about here than just physical, I believe. I think he's talking about other potential places in our lives where we could be in the service of or spending our time, a period of time on. Things like this. So physically, we can't be here two places at once. But what about our emotions? Do we try to be two places in our emotions at once? Do we try to be two places in our mental thing? We're right here and over there. We're trying to be two places in our minds, two places in our hearts, in our spirits, in our walk with God. See, the tricky part is with doing this is that often you could appear to be putting your time into something because you're there in the physical. We're here in the physical. We're serving it. We go to a church service. But you could be putting your time into something totally different in your emotions, in your mind, in your heart, in the spiritual realm, and in different places and serving it. And so I think we get very good at looking like we're serving the right masters. We have our, everything together, that we're here for the right things, but our mind, our will, our emotions, our hearts, our spirits are somewhere else. We're present somewhere else with someone else doing something else. And I think Jesus is letting us know that not only physically can't you serve two masters, and just like you can't be here physically for two things at once, I think this, you can't be present emotionally, relationally, mentally, spiritually in two places at once as well. So this is how I put it. Your present can't serve two masters. I know this is deep. Some of you are just like, this is Sunday morning. I'm supposed to just come and I don't have to think. That's all right. But your present, remember, what was the definition of present? The now that has your consistent undivided attention and focus. Your present can't serve two masters. James references, if you're taking notes, write James 1:8. I'm not going to read it today. But he says this, a double-minded person is unstable in all their ways. That word double-minded is dipsychos, two psyches. That word means unwavering. No, it means wavering, uncertain, doubting, divided in interest. I like that. A person who is divided in interest has some instability and inconsistency and uncertainty in their life. Why? Because it pulls you into two different directions. Someone who is trying to have their interest, their focus, their attention, who's trying to be present in two different places creates instability in their life, double-minded. If you try to be mentally present for two different purposes, you're going to struggle. God's purpose and other purposes. Oh, I want to do this, but this. It's going to cause difficulty if you try to be mentally present for that. How about double-emotioned person? That's not a word. But your emotions are interested in multiple places, uncertain where they should land, all over the place. Try this. Husbands, try to be emotionally present for two different women in your life. the same way, and invest in it. Watch how well that doesn't work. Same way with guys or girls with guys. Try to be emotionally present, having now undivided attention and focus for two different women at the same time. It's not going to work. Double-spirited person, spiritual person. If you try to be spiritually present for two different gods, small g, because a lot of us aren't worshiping other gods specifically, but we have other gods, right? That we try to be present for. So what happens at church? You're here at church, but you are present for this if you're on this the whole time. I don't know. I fight with it too when I'm here. I realize now that the camera and the angle it goes, if I go over here and they move it, right? And I take notes right there. If I do anything on my screen, people can see it online. So I have to be like, gosh. But if I'm texting, it's usually a structural thing. I'm just letting you know the booth or different things that are going on. Yeah, right. I know, Bob. That's what I'm going to say. But a double-spirited person, they call it fence riding. Anyone ever heard that? 1 foot in, 1 foot out, not sure. You're doing the hokey pokey at church, right? You're doing the hokey pokey in your relationship. You're doing the hokey pokey, what God's calling you to do at your job. You got 1 foot in, you put 1 foot out, you put your 1 foot in, and then you shake it out, Do the hokey pokey, right? And so it kind of have a hokey pokey life. That's not in the notes. I should get back to my notes. But even this about a double-spirited or just this idea of being present two places at once, I noticed this shift in church culture about 5, 6, 7 years ago. And I'm not necessarily saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying it's difficult where I remember asking someone who was new to our church, I said, hey, where are you going to church? Or kind of ask some questions. And they said, well, I think they said they listed 3 different churches they were going to at the same time. This church. And I was like, hey, that's great. And as I was doing this message, I was pondering that idea, and I said, you know what? You can be here for 3 different churches, but it's very difficult to be present for 3 different churches. Oh, I thought I'd get a little bit more. So you can go here to this church and go here to this church and that, but if you want to be present, if you want to get involved in community, if you want to give some undivided attention and focus and consistency to a people, to be present, it's going to be difficult to do that in 2 places at once. So here is, go ahead. And if you're doing that, keep doing here. I'm just going to say, according to James, at some point you're going to have some difficulty distinguishing that because both are going to start to put a demand on your present. All right. And Matthew lists what Jesus says here. He goes, this is what happens if you try to have 2 masters, if you try to be present in 2 different places at once. For either he will hate the one, in verse 24, the second half here. He will hate the one and love the other, or he'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. Jesus is saying, listen, eventually if you try to be present in 2 different places at once, you're going to have to choose. You're either going to find out who you love and who you're devoted to, or what you love and what you're devoted to, or what you want to get rid of, and who you're going to despise. And there's things in our lives that are constantly going to try to pull on your present. Pull on you to allow you to give it some presence, some now consistent undivided attention and focus. Things are going to pull on you. One of these Jesus lists, and I think he lists this because he understands this is one of the biggest pulls on our lives. He says, you cannot serve God and money or wealth. He says, you cannot serve God. The word serve, I just put this, to be present for. You can't be present for God and wealth, God and money. You cannot have your now consistent focus and attention, undivided attention in your emotions, in your thoughts, in your spirits on money and God. Now listen, don't come out of here and say, Pastor Derek says we shouldn't have any money. No, you should. In fact, I think you should be here for money. You should be here for money. What I mean by that is you should have a job that you're here for that produces money in your life. Proverbs talks about that, right? You should be here for schooling that maybe gets you a degree that helps you to take care of your family better because it opens up some doors of opportunities. You should be here for money, but you shouldn't be present for it. Another way of saying that is, you can have money, but money shouldn't. Say that again for those of you in the back that missed it. You can have money, but money shouldn't have you. You can be here for money, but you shouldn't be present for it. Because what happens eventually, sometime in your life, if you try to be present for money, because money's going to make you make some decisions that maybe some other things God wouldn't necessarily do. And so if your decisions are always the bigger car, the better house, the job that provides more money, and that's how you make decisions, then at some point you're going to have difficulty being present for God and money, because God's purpose and money and getting more money are not always going to align perfectly. For instance, my wife and I, more me, are contending with a big seed that was talked about at Koinonia, which was a few weeks ago. And the reason I haven't given it is because I'm contending with it, because it's challenging. And we've kind of decided, now I just got to work that out. But what is happening is there's God's purpose and my plan. My plan and my desire. And we have this for this and some of that. And I got this saved and it's meant for this. And God challenging us to sow beyond something we normally would do. And so I go, okay, there's God's purpose and there's money. And at some point, those are going to be in conflict. And you're going to have to go, okay, which one do I want to be present for? God or wealth? That's for free. Look at that. So right now, remember I was talking about pulling on the present. Right now, there's a lot of things that pull on our present finances. Gosh. Like, I don't know. The cost of living is crazy. Inflation, food prices, gas prices, housing. It's pulling on us and pulling on us emotionally, spiritually, mentally. But there's a lot else happening in this world today and has happened in this last season that has pulled on our present, if we're being honest. Has pulled us around like a dog at the end of a rope and just kind of swinging it around at times, hey? It's felt like that. And what it's doing is it's trying to get our now consistent, undivided attention and focus. I saw things happen in Canada I never thought I would see. Mandates, curfews, restrictions, policy, emergency acts, all of this in trying to pull our present and get us to focus on that. And when we allow our present to be pulled, listen here, even if it starts out as a good thing, we can get so far down that rabbit hole of that, it can pull our present and it can push us into places we shouldn't be going. I'll show you because Jesus talks about this. So Matthew 6:24 says, no man can serve two masters. He's going to love the one, hate the other, hold to the one, despise the other. You can't serve God and money. You can't serve God and wealth. And he says this right after. For this reason I say to you. Somebody needs to hear this morning. I need to hear this morning in the midst of all kind of everything going on. Jesus says, and Matthew writes it down, for this reason, for what reason? What I talked about James saying, hey, if you try to be present in two different places, if you're getting pulled in this direction, and something gets said here and you think this, and something gets said there and you think this, he says, for this reason I said this last verse. Do not be worried. I have come here today partially with some of the things as I'll close with, but to tell somebody this. Do not be worried. Look at your neighbor and say, do not be worried. Look at someone else and say, don't worry. Look at somebody else and say, be happy. And then all together, don't worry. Be happy. Don't worry, be. Anyone? Did I just age myself there? Anyone like under 20 is like, what did he just spasm on stage? Like, what just came out of that, you know? Jen, did you know that? Oh, okay, good. Aylin knew that. I have no idea how. Oh, the Minions. That's why I was like, why do people know that song? Got some more people watching, thank you. Telling you don't be worried if you're online. Somebody needs to hear this. Do not be worried. Take no thought, other translations say. Don't be anxious means To look out for a thing. I like that. Are we sitting there looking out for this specific thing over and over and we're finding it? And he says this, do not be worried about your life as to what you will eat or what you will drink, nor for your body as to what you'll put on. Maybe we're okay with those things, but I'm going to bring it into the modern day today. And so I'm going to tell somebody, encourage some people here, myself included. This is me too. In the natural, I can get here. But someone needs to hear this. Do not be worried about your life as to what you'll eat, what you'll drink, nor for your body as to what you'll put on, nor for your bank account as to whether or not it's going to get frozen. Nor for your government and what it may try do to you, nor for the rising food prices, nor for the rising gas prices, nor for this, nor for that. Do not worry. Listen, Christian, either we take these scriptures to mean what they're saying, and they're for us today, or we just say, hey, it's for Jesus and his disciples, and they worried about some stuff. But guess what? We're allowed to get into worry over some of this because these are different issues. Or are they? See, I've seen some Christians work themselves, and I'm talking to Christians. If you're not a Christian today, maybe this applies to you, or maybe you have a past and you say, okay, that's not me. But I've seen some Christians work themselves into frenzy over what's going on in the government right now. They're frenzied. They're freaking out. They've begun to worry. In fear. It may have started out as a good thing, but they're moving into fear and anxiety and stress. If you find yourself saying, what if, what if, what if, what if, what if, you may be stepping into this. And Jesus says, listen, you can't be present in two different places at once because it's going to create instability in your life. So what you need to come back to is this verse that says, do not worry. Amen. Come on. Why? Well, I need to worry, Pastor Derek. I'm worried. I get it. It's crazy time out there. But he says, do not worry. Listen. Do I agree with everything that's been happening in the government? Absolutely not. Do I think there could be a hidden agenda and there's money pulling some strings and having some things? Sure. Do I think the first time we are seeing signs of a one world currency and one world government and mark that if your end time theology follows it, mark of a beast and you might not be able to spend anything? Hopefully. Yeah, you heard me right. Hopefully. What? Because listen, Christian, if your end-time theology is all of that, then what are we praying? I'm like, God, let it come quickly because it means you're about to move in the end times and you're about to come. Hopefully it's happening. This is the first time in the natural I can look and go, I can actually see what's been talked about for thousands of years. So even if you think and you go, okay, I believe we're going to shift governments and it's going to go righteous and we're going to flip political parties and all that, but even if it doesn't go that way, guess what? God's still on the throne. There's still a plan, and maybe, just maybe, it's what's going to usher in the end-time move of God that brings us into the rapture and different things like that, depending on your end-time theology. So hopefully we're going into some different times, but even no matter what happens, you need to hear this today. Stop worrying. I'm preaching today. If a potential theory pulls your present to worry, then it's time to get back to your sound scriptural theology. Come on, someone needs to grab that today. I was softer on that. I wanted to say a lot more things, and I brought it back. But if your potential theory, if you're worried, if a government policy pulls your present to worry, then it's time to get back into the Word, into theology, into Matthew 6, into Psalm 121 and Psalm 146. Put yourself back into sound scriptural theology. If a new source analogy comes in and you're listening to this podcast or Joe Rogan or this, and it's pulling you to worry, listen, if you like a good conspiracy, knock yourself out. Go for it. But if it pulls your present to worry, you need to check back with sound scriptural theology. Come on. Because Jesus just explains it. I love it. Matthew 6:25, second half of verse 25. I'm running out of breath. Is life not more than food, and the body more than clothing? Is life not more than a paycheck? Is your life not worth more than government interference? Look at the birds of the sky, verse 26. They do not sow, nor reap, nor gather crops into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Come on, somebody. The birds and the bees, yeah. And the trees and the breeze. It says, listen, he says the Father takes care of them. Listen, I don't know about you, but I read in my sound scriptural theology that there was a time of a group called the Israelites who, when they came out of Egypt in bondage, they walked through the wilderness, and it says their clothes didn't wear out and their shoes grew with them, and they didn't have to do anything and buy new clothes because God provided for them. I read about a time when they were going hungry in the wilderness, and God provided something called manna that had nutrients and proteins and carbohydrates. It was gluten-free. It was dairy-free. It provided for them for 40 days. Listen, I don't care if the government blocks your bank account or takes things away. God is still going to provide. Come on. Oh, Jesus. Either we believe it or we don't. Whew. Because he says this right after. Are you not much more important than the birds and the bees and the trees and the breeze? Or how about this? Aren't you as important as the Israelites? Or the disciples when there wasn't enough food because Jesus had been ministering for a while. They had 2 loaves. 2 fish and 5 loaves. And it fed the woman with the oil. What about if the government freezes my bank account? Wow, what an opportunity for faith. What if the government changes how we can do church? Wow, what an opportunity for community. Which of you, by worrying, can add 1 single day to his lifespan? You probably lose life when you worry. You don't gain, for sure, but you probably lose some days. Verse 28, and why are you worried about clothing? Why are you worried about the world system and economy? Notice how the lilies of the field grow. They don't labor, nor do they spin thread for cloth. 29, yet I say to you that not even Solomon in all his glory clothed himself like one of these. Man. It's so good. Verse 30, but if God so clothes the grass of the field, which is alive today, and tomorrow is thrown into the furnace, will he not much more clothe you? Listen, if God takes care of that which he made, trees, birds, bees, trees, breeze, that which he made, how much more will he take care of that which he created and breathed into? Are you not much more important than that? Do you think the lily is sitting there going, I can't believe the government did that today? The tree is going, oh, these policies, they're really shaking my roots. So if you think God, who takes care of that which he made, what about what he created and went, in his image, in his likeness? He's not going, oops. I promise you. He's not going, oops. He says this, you have little faith. Hey, listen, I want to pull you back to a few weeks ago where we talked about fresh faith. Do not worry, verse 31, do not worry then saying, oh, do not worry then what? Saying. How do we know you're worried? Because you're saying, over and over. What if? I don't know. What? Did we not a few weeks ago say, stop saying what you're seeing and start speaking what you're believing? Did we not say that a few weeks ago? I hear myself included, so you don't feel this is, I can get into the pattern of just speaking what I'm seeing. It's this and this. Yeah, you're probably right. But are we speaking from what we're believing? He says, verse 32, for the Gentiles eagerly seek all these things. I'm wrapping up here. The world worries about these things. The world's supposed to worry about these things. They don't have another solution. The economy is their solution. The government is their solution. Is the government our solution? No. I think we sometimes think it is. And if the government is good, then God can work, and if it's not now, ultimately, yes, it'll be easier. But let me tell you, in history, there's been many times that there's been governments that haven't been great, and God still moved. Herod wanted to kill Jesus. He'd heard about this Jesus, and he says, I'm killing every baby 2 years and under, every baby boy. Jesus comes to Mary and Joseph and says, move, get out of here. Helps them survive. David. The verse, I want you to write this down. I think it's Psalm 121 and 146. Let me just get it. Yeah. You need to go read this if you're struggling with some stuff. But this word came to me in the middle as I was going, God, what's happening? What's a word you can give me? And it's the picture of David who says this, I look to the hills, I look to the mountains. My help comes from government. My help comes from having a solid job. My help comes from the Lord. We go, oh, well, that's easy for David to say. Do you know when he wrote that and when he said that? The government of his day and in his life was King Saul. What was King Saul trying to do to David? Kill him. Just him. Not all Christians. Just him. If anyone had a right to say, I am pushing back on the government, it was David. Do you know how David handled his unjust government? Who was chasing him down over and over to kill him. One time, he had a chance to hurt Saul. And everyone around had said, hurt him. Backstab him. Say something negative. Kill him. And he cut a piece of his robe. That's all he did. And it says he was so convicted. And we go, well, Saul was God's chosen. He wasn't at that time. He had pulled his anointing off and already put it on David. And even with an unjust leader, David said, because we got to understand, governmental authority is ordained by God. The person in it we may not like, but the authority of government. And we have to be careful, because if we take David's model, if we are speaking over and over words of divisiveness and how much we hate it and different things like that, then guess what? We learned a few weeks ago that the seeds of the things you're seeding is what becomes seen. And so it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy of worry. We speak all the things we're worried about. We sow the seeds. They become seen, and we go, see, there's reasons to worry. And then we speak the things we're worried about. It's a cycle I talked about. And we get in this wrong cycle instead of saying, God, I'm going to get into prayer and I'm going to start speaking something into the government and into the spirit realms that's going to change some stuff. It may look like on the outside something's not going right, but guess what? Saul may be doing some unjust things, but I'm not going to touch the Lord's anointed. I'm going to wait for God to move and shift some things, and so I'm going to speak life into the government. And then watch things change. All right, I have got to move on. Last little bit, I'm tying in here. I haven't forgotten about here and present. Verse 33, seek first his kingdom. Put your present on his kingdom. Put your present on God. Put your present on his kingdom and his righteousness. Create some breathing room for God in your life. Please do it. Please. We're going through too much right now to not have to be able to be able to do this on our own. I have not turned to prayer more than I have in this last season. Because there's so many things. I like to think I'm a good problem solver, but I've hit the wall so much. Even on how to present this, even on how to say some things, even how to encourage a church that you know is split in ideology and different ways of thinking. God, how do we keep it on the main thing? Jesus. Seek first his kingdom, and all these things will be, and his righteousness. Look, and he says this, all these things. What things? The things you're worried about happening. The shortages that may happen. I go to Walmart and I look and I'm like, man, there's a lot of supplies that are like, it's starting to get thin. What happened? You know, you can get into that. But seek first the kingdom and all these things will be provided to you. God will take care of you and your bank account. 34, do not worry about tomorrow. Someone needs to hear that. If you've been worrying about tomorrow, stop. Do not worry. This is from Jesus. Do not worry about tomorrow. Watch, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. There's enough issues today. Why would we project into the what ifs? Let's project into prayer. Here's what I said. Do not let the worries of tomorrow pull your present away from God's purpose today. Do not let the worries of tomorrow pull your present away from God's purpose today. What's God's purpose for our church right now? Let's get in the presence. Let's pray. Let's seek God. Let's start digging in praise and worship to watch God move. Don't let the worries of tomorrow pull your present, pull your now, undivided, consistent attention and focus away from God's purpose today. Listen, when you feel the worries of tomorrow pull at your present, you know it's time to breathe in fresh presence. When you feel the worries of tomorrow pull on your present, pull on your now, try to get your emotions and your mind and your spirit in two different places at once, and you're going, I don't know about here, and it's creating that instability and that uncertainty, and fear and anxiety are rising up, and you're going, I don't know what to do. Guess what? It's time to pull back and push into the fresh presence. And here's where I'm bringing it all together and I'm done. This presence that we're talking about doesn't just happen by being here. Just because you're here at church today doesn't guarantee you're going to experience the presence. Just because you come to a worship night on March 11th doesn't guarantee it. You should, because it's better than being absent. Now, God's mercy and grace, you know, someone beside you may be getting loaded down with God's presence because they came present, and you may get an overflow of that. That's why you come corporately, because sometimes people can carry you. But if you want to be able to maintain it and move past just these events, just being here doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to experience God's presence, because I believe this, present unlocks presence. Oh, I thought that was going to land a bit better. It's present that unlocks presence. Think about this. If I want more presence in my marriage, whatever that means, intimacy, emotional connection, then I'm going to have to pay the price to be more present. Not just be here and then go, why aren't I feeling the presence with my wife? Right? Present unlocks presence, not just here. So if I want more substance, more presence with my kids, then you might have to be willing to become more present. See, this isn't just a Christian religious thing. It applies to God's presence. But if you want more presence in an area in your life, if you're a non-Christian or you're new to this and you're going this whole presence, you're watching online and I don't understand this, then guess what? If you want something more presence in your life in something, whether it be your job, whether it be in a relationship, whether it be in a friendship, whether it be your small business, you're going to have to be willing to be more present. Give some of your now consistent and attention and focus, undivided attention and focus. Present unlocks presence. Music team, come on up. Fresh presence in your marriage, new life, new breath in your marriage, become more present. Fresh presence with your kids, make time to be present. Fresh presence in your church. Are you just here? Are you willing to be present? Because I believe God is roll calling today. God is roll calling today, and we started out by saying here, but I think God is asking us, are we willing to be present? So I'm going to read a few more names. And whether by faith, whether by whatever reason, or because you want to be a part of it, I just think it's encouraging. I'm committing Pastor Derek, God, in front of everyone. He's calling my name, and I'm going to say, God, I'm willing to be present. Who's willing to be present today? Come on, if you're willing. Judith, I'm calling your name. What's your response? Present. Angie, present. Is that Tina? No, that's not. Oh, I saw Tina while you're on the spot, Tina. Present? Come on. Rob. Danielle. Vicky. Oh, is that Vicky too? There's two Vickies. Oh, there. Other Vicky, present. All right. Come on, anybody else? Hugh, present? Because watch, guys, as we become more present, we are going to unlock more presence. And get ready to watch things change. And ultimately, whether it's your marriage, whether it's your job, whether it's your school, you do need to connect to the presence of God, because that's what fixes and helps everything. But here is not always enough. We've got to be present. Do we got some present people here today? Here's the challenge for next week and through this week and going into next week. I want you to write 3 to 5 things down. 1 to 2 to 3 things. 1, 2, or 3 things that you go, whether it was in the service today and you go, man, I could be more present in this area. I have some. Or whether God in the next few days reveals it to you, I want you to write down and say, God, I'm willing to be more present in this area. Whether it's prayer, whether it's reading the word, whether it's date night with your wife, whether it's playing cards with your kids, whether it's something like that, you say, I want to be, whether it's in church and say, hey God, I'm going to commit to be present while I'm at church. Maybe you're watching online and you say, I need to shift to be present in church. We've been really pushing March 13th and 20th. If you consider City Center Church your home, you need to be here for those days. We are transitioning something into the new season, and you need to be a part of that and see what God's doing and hear what's going on. So maybe this is the time, if you've gone away from COVID and you've been nervous about those things and you haven't been in church for 2 years, come be present. Not just be here, come be present. But write a few things down. God, I'm going to be present for this, for that. Because I believe God wants to pour out His presence like never before. Next week, we're going to talk a bit more about this, what you must do to be present. We're going to talk about being present for praise. This is going to be exciting, so come with your praise clothes on. Don't wear 2 layers like this, it's inhibiting. If you come in like workout gear, let's go for it. Maybe we should do that.